Welcome to Alien Worlds. I'm Andrew West. I'm a professor in the Department of Astronomy at Boston University. And Alien Worlds is a class that is focused on all of the new planets that we've been discovering around other stars. This is a really exciting time of scientific discovery because the first time in human history we know that planets don't just exist around other stars. They're not just the 8 planets in our own solar system, but that planets are common. In fact, we think that of the 100 to 200 billion stars in our own Milky Way galaxy, almost every single one has at least one planet. That's hundreds of billions of planets in our galaxy alone. And our Milky Way galaxy is just one of hundreds of billions of galaxies in the observable universe. And so we're looking at the possibility of there being hundreds of billions of planets. Now you might ask, why is this class called Alien Worlds and not Alien Planets if it's about planets around other stars? And that's so we can be inclusive of things like asteroids and moons and maybe even those dwarf planets like Pluto. And so I've used the more inclusive term worlds instead of planets. But we're still going to talk about planets. And when we talk about planets around stars outside of the sun, those are actually called extrasolar planets. But astronomers have shortened that to exoplanets. And so we'll use that term kind of throughout the class. This course is going to teach you a number of techniques that both give you some insight into how we detect all of these planets around other stars, and actually how we characterize them, how we get some of their properties. It's going to introduce you to some of the people who are working in this field, who are actually doing science in this field. And I really hope that it gives you a better sense of our place and your place in the universe. So kind of structurally, we've broken this course into 9 different sections or modules. In each module, we'll cover a different topic, and we'll assess your learning of that topic. But we've also broken each of those modules into a bunch of subsections, or what we're calling chapters, that consist of short lectures, some demonstrations, again, interviews with scientists, simulations in some cases, practice problems, and then some short quizzes. And throughout the course, you'll be able to interact with both me and my team through some online resources. And you'll be able to ask us questions about either topics that really interest you, or perhaps topics that confuse you a little bit. One of the things I share with all of my students here at Boston University, and I certainly want to share it with you, is that science and astronomy is always changing. It's not something that's static. It's not a standard textbook where you memorize a bunch of answers and spit them back out. This is a process that we're constantly going through. And the study of exoplanets, planets around other stars, is a perfect example of that. Because every day we're learning new things about these distant worlds. And a really fun example I show my students is a clip from a textbook that I got. It's an astronomy textbook from 1936. And it's actually an image or an artist's rendition of what the surface of the moon would look like. And you can see it here. And what I love is the caption here, which actually reads that what an interesting place this would be, but one that can never be enjoyed, the surface of the moon. And of course, we know that just over 30 years later, we landed people on the moon, and they got to enjoy this image. They got to see it with their own eyes. Something that was thought to be impossible was then very possible a very short amount of time later. And the study of exoplanets is really no different. 20, 30 years ago, we knew of only the 8 planets in our solar system. Well, at that point, I guess there were 9, because Pluto was a planet still. But we only knew of the planets in our solar system. And I think many of us would have said, yeah, we believe there are probably planets around other stars, but we had no evidence of that. And we've now gone to an era where we actually know that these planets not only exist, but are common. And we are constantly learning new things. So I want you to keep that in mind as you go through this course, as you look at online media, that this process of astronomy, of science, and particularly the topic of exoplanets is constantly changing. And part of what keeps it changing is new technologies. our ability to peer deeper, to look at signals that are ever so much fainter. And that's really what's led the change over the last couple of decades, and particularly in the last several years. One of the things I would like to highlight today, and will highlight throughout the course, is the spacecraft that really has led to some of the major discoveries in exoplanet science. And that is the Kepler Space Telescope. This is a NASA-based telescope that is in space and has led to the discovery of more than 3,000 planets around other stars. It is from these detections that we can say, again, statistically for the first time in human history, that planets are common. And we'll talk more about the Kepler spacecraft and some of the other both ground-based observatories as well as space-based satellites that have led to some of these wonderful discoveries. I hope you enjoy Alien Worlds.